I didn't lose everything overnight, it just felt like it. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can live so close to your heartbeat and still carry a knife behind their smile. My name is Amara, and if you told me 3 years ago that the woman I trusted most would be the one to tear my world apart, I would have laughed and said, not Janelle. She's my best friend. But the truth? Janelle was never my friend. She was my warning. We met in our first year at university. Two girls with dreams too big for our pockets and hearts too open for our own good. Janelle was magnetic, confident, beautiful, fearless. I was quieter, more thoughtful. She once joked that I was the type of girl who'd give someone my umbrella in a storm, then stand there and get drenched with a smile. At the time I thought it was a compliment. We shared everything. Clothes. Secrets. Plans. When I got my first corporate internship, she celebrated like it was her win. When her boyfriend cheated, I was the one holding her hand through the tears. I trusted her with pieces of me I didn't share with anyone else. I believed we were building our future side by side. And then I met Darius. He was sharp, ambitious, and surprisingly gentle beneath the surface. He challenged me, pushed me, made me feel like I could do more, be more. We started slow, but it didn't take long before he became the love of my life. Janelle was thrilled, or so she said. He's perfect for you, she'd whisper. You deserve this, Amara. For a while, life felt like it was falling into place. I landed a full-time role at my dream company. Darius proposed one evening beneath a sky full of stars, with a ring that once belonged to his grandmother. Janelle was my maid of honor. She planned the bridal shower, helped pick the dress, even wrote a toast that made me cry. But behind every smile, she was pulling threads loose. The first unraveling came quietly. One afternoon, I returned home from work and found Darius acting strange. Distant. Distracted. I thought maybe it was stress. I asked, he denied anything was wrong. We moved forward, but the tension lingered. Then I got called into HR at my job. Someone had sent in a complaint, an anonymous tip accusing me of leaking confidential information. My heart sank. I had done nothing wrong, but the damage was done. I was suspended pending investigation. The day I left the office, I called Janelle in tears. She rushed over, held me, said she'd help me fight it. I thanked God for her. What I didn't know was that she was the one who had submitted the complaint. I found out the truth weeks later. Darius left. Just packed a bag and walked out without a word. I tried calling, no answer. I showed up at his apartment, he was gone. Disappeared. And then the final blow came in the form of an Instagram photo. Janelle. In his apartment. Wearing his hoodie. Caption, home feels like this. The world around me fell silent. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Everything I had built, my relationship, my career, my sanity, was gone. And all the while, the person I had trusted most was standing in the ruins, smiling. I wish I could tell you I got up right away. That I brushed myself off, gave a dramatic speech in the mirror, and rose from the ashes like some goddess of revenge. But I didn't. I broke. Completely. I stopped eating. I stopped answering texts. My mother had to fly in just to pull me out of bed. For weeks, I floated through life like a ghost of myself. Because how do you rebuild when the very foundation of your life was a lie? But one thing about hitting rock bottom, it teaches you who you are. And I was not going to let her win. You don't wake up one day and decide to become unrecognizable to your past. It starts in fragments. A glass of water. A 10-minute walk. A journal entry where the words don't make sense, but the pain needs somewhere to live. That's how it began for me. Slowly. Painfully. With silence and small steps. After Janelle and Darius destroyed me, I disappeared from the world that knew me. I deleted my social media. Shut off my phone. Even changed apartments. I needed space to grieve, not just the loss of love but the loss of innocence. I had spent so much of my life believing that loyalty protected you. That if you poured goodness into someone, they'd never turn that kindness into a weapon. But I learned. And I promised myself something. I wasn't going to let this be my ending. The HR investigation at work quietly closed. I was cleared. They apologized, offered me my role back. But I refused. I didn't want to walk back into a place that had questioned me so easily. Instead, I took the severance and invested it into an idea I'd written down once in the back of my notebook. An idea for a digital platform supporting Black women navigating corporate spaces. Resume support. Mental health advocacy. Leadership training. It was a seed. Just a sketch, really. But it gave me something to wake up for. While Janelle was posing with my ex and pretending she hadn't stolen half my life, I was laying bricks. Quietly. Relentlessly. I taught myself web design in the evenings. I studied algorithms. I reached out to mentors. I created content from my living room with a cracked phone and a $10 tripod. No brand deals. No flashy launches. Just value, voice, and vulnerability. And the most beautiful thing happened. Women listened. They showed up. They shared. Within 6 months, my platform had grown to 50,000 followers. My DMs were filled with stories. Women who had been pushed out, underestimated, overlooked. I saw myself in all of them. And I knew what I was building was more than a business. It was a movement. The pain hadn't left. But it had purpose now. One night, I got an email from a producer at a national morning show. She had seen one of my videos go viral. What to do when they steal your seat at the table. She wanted to feature me in a segment on women rewriting their stories after betrayal. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. This was happening. I was happening. That morning as I walked into the studio, mic clipped to my blazer, cameras blinking around me, I thought about Janelle. About how she used to say I was too safe. That I'd always be the girl who'd cheered from the sidelines. But here I was. Center stage. Owning every part of the story she thought would ruin me. The interview aired and changed everything. Offers flooded in. Brand collaborations, speaking gigs, even a book proposal. I launched an online course that sold out in 2 hours. Suddenly, the girl who had once curled up on her bathroom floor in heartbreak was being called a powerhouse. And that's when the message came. From Janelle. It was simple. Just 5 words. Can we please talk, Amara? I stared at it for a long time. No apologies. No explanations. Just a door she was hoping I'd open. But I wasn't the same girl she left in pieces. Not anymore. There's something strange about watching your betrayer try to crawl back. Especially when they don't come with remorse but with entitlement. Janelle's message sat in my inbox for days. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. It was like a rotting piece of fruit on the table. Too spoiled to keep, too symbolic to throw away. She wasn't reaching out because she regretted what she did. She was reaching out because she saw me rise. Because now I was everywhere. My name was mentioned in business podcasts. I was speaking on panels, featured in magazines, being recognized in grocery stores. Every little thing they thought made me less than, my quiet demeanor, my patience, my softness had become my power. And that power scared them. A few weeks after that message, I attended a private event for emerging female leaders. It was classy, intimate, champagne flutes, soft jazz, everyone in black and white. I was one of the featured speakers. As I stepped onto the small stage, clutching the mic in my hand, I did what I always did. I told the truth. I wasn't supposed to be here, I began, my voice steady but full of weight. I was supposed to disappear. After the lies. After the betrayal. After being told I was the weak one. But funny thing about women like us, we don't stay broken. The room clapped. Heads nodded. I felt the electricity of recognition. These women knew. They'd lived it. But just as I stepped off the stage, I froze. Because standing near the exit, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched, was Janelle. Still beautiful. Still poised. But suddenly, small. She walked toward me, slow and hesitant, like someone approaching a stranger they thought they knew. Amara, she said softly. I didn't flinch. I didn't hug her. I just looked her straight in the eye and waited. She took a breath, but no apology came. Instead she said, I didn't think it would go like this. Like what? I asked. I thought you'd disappear. I thought you'd fall apart. I nodded slowly. You thought wrong. She blinked, maybe shocked at how calm I was. How still. I miss us, she said. The way we used to be. Before everything. That's when I realized, this wasn't about guilt. It wasn't even about friendship. It was about losing access. She missed being close to me now that I was someone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give a speech. I just leaned in and said, "You should have thought about that before you handed me to him like a gift wrapped in betrayal." Her face fell. But I didn't stay to see the rest. I turned and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the floor. I never got an apology. Not then. Not ever. But I didn't need it anymore. That's the thing no one tells you about rising. You stop waiting for closure when you realize your healing was never dependent on them in the first place. Months passed. Darius tried to reach out too. He sent flowers to my office. A handwritten letter to my management team. An email disguised as a congratulations, but filled with personal memories and regret. He even showed up at one of my book signings. I saw him before he could reach the front of the line. Same eyes. Same smile. But none of the power he once held. Security asked if I wanted him removed. I didn't. Let him see. Let him see the women lined up for blocks to hear me speak. Let him hear the claps, the cheers, the raw power in my voice as I told the truth he tried to bury. I never acknowledged him. Never gave him the satisfaction of a glance. Because that night on that stage I wasn't just telling my story. I was telling our story. Every woman who'd been betrayed by someone who claimed to love her. Every woman who'd been told she wasn't enough, only to rise and become everything. And as the lights dimmed and the room roared, I felt it, that quiet triumph. The kind that doesn't scream revenge but lives in the fact that you are still here. Thriving. There's a moment when you've clawed your way out of pain, where you finally pause and realize, you're no longer surviving. You're winning. For me, that moment came on a rooftop in Manhattan, overlooking a city that used to terrify me. I was being honored at a Women in Business gala. The lights were soft. The air was crisp. I was wearing a dress I couldn't have afforded a year ago, standing beside women whose names once only lived in headlines. But now I was one of them. A feature article had just been released, calling me the woman who rose from betrayal to build a brand empire. My mentorship program had launched in over a dozen cities. I had secured funding for a foundation that helped women get back on their feet after emotional and financial abuse. The very thing that was meant to destroy me became the fuel behind my legacy. And no one could rewrite that. Still, I'd be lying if I said the scars didn't ache sometimes. Healing wasn't a perfect line. It wasn't all empowerment speeches and graceful exits. It was crying on bathroom floors. It was remembering conversations that made my stomach turn. It was choosing, again and again, not to let bitterness win. There were nights I'd sit by the window of my high-rise and wonder, why me? Why did the people I trusted see me as disposable? Why did my love have to be the one used as currency in someone else's selfish plan? And the answer? Because I made it easy. I gave without asking. Loved without limits. Trusted without proof. But that version of me, she didn't die. She evolved. Now I still loved, but I chose who was worthy. I still gave, but never at the cost of myself. I still trusted, but I listened to my gut louder than anyone else's voice. That rooftop night, a woman approached me. Late 50s, elegant, the kind of quiet presence that commands a room without needing to shout. She placed a hand on my arm and said, "Your story, it healed something in me. I never had the words. But you gave them to me." I didn't cry. But I felt the lump in my throat. Because that's when it truly hit me, I hadn't just risen. I had become someone else's lifeline. My pain wasn't wasted. It was repurposed. That, to me, was the real revenge. Not the headlines. Not the status. Not even the fact that Darius and Janelle were long-forgotten footnotes in a story too big for them to stain. It was the legacy. The ripple effect. The lives being rebuilt because I refused to stay broken. One afternoon months later, I passed by the very cafe where Darius first told me he wasn't ready for something serious. 2 weeks before proposing to Janelle. I paused at the window. Inside, the tables were different. The menu had changed. But the memory remained. And strangely, I felt nothing. No rage. No sadness. Just clarity. They say healing is letting go. But for me, it was remembering without the pain. I'd finally reached the place where the past couldn't touch me. Later that week, my assistant told me Darius had emailed again. This time it wasn't personal. He wanted to discuss potential business collaboration. I almost laughed. I didn't respond. I didn't even read it. But I did call a staff meeting and propose a new policy. No business with individuals who once underestimated or exploited women. It passed unanimously. At our next conference, I stood before hundreds and shared this. They thought they could discard us, use us, break us. But we are not fragile. We are forged. And our stories? They are not shame, they are strength. The room stood in silence, before erupting into applause. And as I stepped down from the stage, heart steady, chin high, I knew this wasn't the peak. It was just the beginning. There's something eerie about seeing the people who tried to break you fall, slowly, publicly, and with no one left to shield them. Not because you orchestrated it. Not because you pulled the strings. But because life has a way of handing back what people give out. I wasn't looking for karma to catch up with Darius or Janelle. But when it did, I won't lie. It felt like justice had finally shown up. It started with a headline. I was in LA for a panel when my phone lit up with a notification from a business news app. I almost ignored it. But then I saw the name. CEO Darius Kane investigated for fraud. Investors pull out of Core One Media deal. I stared at the screen. I wasn't surprised. Just stunned it finally happened. Turns out Darius had been cutting corners for years. Inflated reports. Overpromising on ad revenue. He was always more charm than substance, and eventually, that kind of smoke and mirrors leadership crumbles under pressure. Especially when people stop covering for you. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't even mention it to my team. But that evening, while sipping tea in a quiet hotel lounge, I allowed myself a long breath, the kind that settles deep in your soul. That was the night I knew for sure I'd truly let go. A few weeks later, the rest of the story began to unravel. Janelle had left him. Publicly. Apparently, the investors pulling out triggered a domino effect. Deals fell apart, lawsuits piled up, and the lavish lifestyle they'd built together cracked at the seams. The penthouse was sold. The luxury cars gone. And Janelle? She posted a long, teary video online talking about betrayal and how people change when the money runs out. I watched part of it. Then I closed it. I had no energy for her version of the story. Because I knew the truth. She didn't leave him because he changed. She left him because the benefits disappeared. And isn't that the same way she came into his life? Not for love. Not for depth. For what he could give her. It was poetic, really. The man who traded loyalty for lust. The woman who betrayed her cousin for status. And both of them now, left with nothing. Meanwhile, I had everything they said I never would. Peace. Purpose. Power. One night, I got a call from a friend who still worked in corporate media. He told me Darius had tried to pitch a comeback campaign. Rebrand. From fallen CEO to resilient leader. He wanted to sell the story of redemption, of lessons learned. But no one bit. He's radioactive now, she said. People don't want charm. They want integrity. You changed the game. Me. The woman he once said wasn't driven enough. I looked around my office, framed awards on the walls, a vibrant team building something real, a waiting list for my next mentorship program, and smiled. I hadn't just survived. I had thrived so loudly that his voice, once thunderous in my life, now sounded like a whisper lost in the wind. But I didn't dance on his downfall. I didn't send him messages. Didn't watch his stories. Didn't respond when his name came up in conversations. Because revenge wasn't a moment. It was a state of being. It was waking up every day free of shame, regret, and guilt. It was no longer questioning my worth, my instincts, or my voice. It was knowing I was never the problem. They were. And now everyone else knew it too. At a leadership gala that winter, I was asked to give a keynote titled, Becoming the Hero of Your Own Story. I walked up to the podium, heart steady, heels clicking against the marble floor, and I told the room full of women, your downfall begins the moment you believe someone else's opinion of you is the truth. But your comeback? That starts when you decide they were wrong. I saw heads nod. Tears well. Hands squeeze other hands. Because we all knew that feeling. Of being underestimated. Replaced. erased. But we also knew the fire it takes to rise anyway. Afterward, a young woman approached me in the lobby. She looked barely out of college, voice trembling. I just got out of a relationship where he told me I'd never be more than a sidekick in his story, she said. I smiled gently. Then maybe it's time to write your own. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. The day I signed the papers to acquire the building where Corwin once had its offices, I paused for a long moment outside the revolving glass doors. A crisp wind brushed against my cheek, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the surrealness of standing where I once stood, heartbroken and humiliated, now as the owner of everything they thought I could never have. I didn't buy the space out of spite. I bought it because it was prime real estate, a strategic location for my expanding brand and an ideal space for the women's innovation hub I'd been building quietly behind the scenes. But let's be honest. There was something deeply satisfying about watching the Corwin name come down, letter by shiny letter, and my company's logo take its place. Where once they dismissed me as dead weight, now hung the emblem of everything they said I wasn't. Powerful. Visionary. Unstoppable. The woman they tried to silence was now the one everyone was listening to. I hosted a soft opening for my new headquarters the following month. The lobby was transformed, sleek, warm, filled with sunlight and laughter. My mother cried when she walked in. My best friend hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. There were speeches, smiles, and silent glances exchanged between women who had survived the same fire I did. Each one of us had a story. Mine just happened to come full circle. Sometime during the event, I caught a glimpse of a man standing outside the glass entrance. He wore a dark coat, his posture stiff, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Darius. I didn't panic. I didn't look away. I simply watched him for a moment, and then turned back to my guests. He didn't come in. Of course he didn't. He wasn't part of this chapter. And he never would be. After the event, I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive suite that used to be his. It was mine now. I walked to the window, took in the skyline, and finally exhaled all the remnants of the girl who once begged a man to believe in her worth. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built something no one could ever take from her again. This wasn't just a win. It was closure. It was healing. It was the final page in a story that began with heartbreak and ended with power. People always say success is the best revenge. But that's not true. Peace is. Because while they're still haunted by the choices they made, I sleep at night. While they're still telling stories to salvage their pride, I'm too busy building an empire to listen. I never needed to destroy them to rise. All I had to do was stop waiting for them to see my value and start living like it was never up for debate. If you've ever been underestimated, cast aside, or told you weren't enough, let this be your reminder. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need validation to rise. And you definitely don't need to dim your light to fit someone else's broken version of love or success. Your story isn't over. It's just getting started. So don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of women who turned their pain into purpose. Because the best chapters are written not in whispers, but in roaring triumph.